Thank you. Next.
Bob Zaka with Best.
Thank you. Next. Got about 5 people on the line that have not identified themselves.
This is Kelly Claire Ross with Best.
To Kelly, okay.
And Claire Ross, I think I heard.
Claire Ross?
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone else?
There could be people on the screen that also called in for audio.
Is that it? Okay, we're going to go with that.
Neil has said he is good. We can start the meeting.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to welcome everyone to another meeting in the age of technology. And since we've already done roll call and accounted for everyone, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And we have meeting minutes that need approval.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Who is that? Oh, thank you.
Is there a second?
This is Carl Yeh. I'll second it.
Okay. So
This
with
conference
that,
will now be recorded.
okay. Well, we're just up to voting. So all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Okay. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Minutes are approved. Looking for any adjustments to the agenda or announcements from MPC members. Okay, hearing none. Next on the agenda is comments from the audience.
Mayor, I hope that the MPC members and staff received the emails that I have sent out over the past day or so. I received a number of email public comments that requested that I pass them along to you. So hopefully you have all of those. And I did check with a couple of the people to see if they would also want to address MPC during this public comment period. And I believe Rob Zaka has indicated that he would like to speak now.
Okay, all right. So Rob, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lundberg, members of MPC. This is Rob Zaka, Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. And as Paul indicated, I'm following up on a letter that I and a bunch of other community leaders sent to you earlier this week in reference to MPC, Central Lane MPO's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. You had an extended discussion at your meeting last month that lasted about 25 minutes. And we noted that you made 2 very good points. One is that there isn't enough funding for active transportation projects and that MPC would love to see more funding. And that's true and correct. And the other point that we heard you make is that MPC, as it's not a city or county or metro in Portland, doesn't have land use authority. And that's also correct. And so we support those statements. But we were left with the impression that you spent 25 minutes talking about what you can't do. And it's long, long overdue to take action on climate change. As we know in our letter, Oregon actually understood the problem in 1988 when Governor Neil Goldschmidt was in office. And in 1990, 30 years ago, there was a plan to take integrated land use and transportation actions to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, to reduce them by 20% by the year 2005. Now, 35 years later, and we can't be hearing what you can't do. We need to hear what you are going to do. And so in our letter, we say there are 4 things to do: compact urban development, parking policy, active transportation, integrated planning and measuring. MPC is the regional planning body for our area. And if you can't take decisions, you can certainly talk about decisions that the cities of Eugene, Springfield, Coburg, Lane County, LTD, and ODOT can take separately. And as the federal government requires you to coordinate activities. So we're calling on you to step up, do what you can with the powers you have. The community supports you and we'll be watching. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Is there anyone else?
I'm not aware of anybody else that indicated to me they wanted to speak. Are there other comments from the audience?
Yes, this is Claire Ross from Bass. I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Claire.
Hi, yes. So my name is Claire Ross. Thank you, Central Lane MPO policy body, for having us here today. I am Safe Streets Coordinator for Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. We're a local educational nonprofit advocating for safer transportation for everybody. So through the lens of transportation advocacy and care for the well-being of our community, I'd like to share my support for some of the especially important and time-sensitive MPO-funded projects in the proposed list. And to name just a few out of those, the Safe Routes to School Coordinator Support Funding, the Hunsaker Lane Complete Street Improvement, out of Lane County, the Laura Street Project, which will add important sidewalk connectivity to the Springfield area, out of Springfield, the Walking and Biking Network Improvements, Q Street Reconstruction, and Mohawk Boulevard Preservation. This list is not definitive. It's only a list of highlights. BEST supports all of the projects in the list, but we're wanting to highlight just a few that we've been following more closely. The aforementioned projects each play an important role in increasing the quality of our transportation safety in the Eugene, Springfield, Lane County, and beyond area. Whether it's the Safe Routes to School coordinators ensuring the safety of our youth and education, or funding improvements for known dangerous and deadly areas like Hunsaker Lane, where Irene Ferguson's life was cut short by the driver of a car, or laying the groundwork for safer pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure in order to reduce congestion in areas like Oakway or Franklin. We're acknowledging the peril of our planet by making steps towards an electric bus fleet. These projects cover a wide range of concerns that are at the top of BEST list of must-have for a safer transportation system for everybody. I mentioned before that some of these projects are time-sensitive, and I mean this in the respect that if we do not fund and make some of these safety improvements now, we can and will lose more lives to unsafe conditions on our streets and sidewalks, or lack thereof. Many of these improvements are baseline, meaning that we have a lot of work to do in moving towards a transportation system that we can sit back and call safe. Providing funding for these projects would be a proud step for the Central Lane MPO in the right direction towards safer transportation. Thank you.
I have the iPhone 8 Plus review. And,
thank you, Claire. Someone else is talking. I'm not sure whether you wanted to turn under comments. All right, so if there's no one else under comments, then I would move on to item 6, MPO issues. And the first one is our Central Lane MPO funding application. And Dan Callister, are you the lead staff for this?
Yes. Thank you. So this item is presenting the funding recommendation from the Transportation Planning Committee. This is what's recommended for funding for the MPO's discretionary funds, their Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, Transportation Alternatives, and Congestion Mitigation Air Quality funds for federal fiscal years 2022 through 2024. This was originally presented last month at MPC, where we had a public hearing on a proposal. At their last meeting, the TPC formalized a recommendation based off of that proposal, although there are some changes. I'll point you to Exhibit A in the packet, which presents the recommendation as a column. It compares it to the original proposal as well, and there, in the recommended column, there are some cells that are highlighted or shaded gray. That's where the recommendation is changed from the original proposal that was the subject of the public hearing a month ago. So in light of those changes, we're are asking that we hold another public hearing at today's meeting. Following that, we ask for approval of resolution 2020-05, which would amend the TIP to program as recommended in Exhibit A. I'm happy to answer further questions about this recommendation or the process if you have them. If you have questions about the specific projects, I would defer those to local agency staff.
Okay, so I'm looking for anyone with questions about the proposal for today. Okay, if there's no questions, I'm going to open the public hearing and see if there's anyone wishing to speak to this public hearing.
Mayor, I will note that many of actually all of the letters and emails that I forwarded to you earlier and the comments by Claire Roth, which echoed her letter, were specific to this funding recommendation. So I just want to note that as part of the public record.
Okay, but there's no one that...
No one else has indicated to me that they want to speak during the public hearing.
Okay. So with that, then I'm going to close the public hearing and see if there's any. I know I have one other comment and don't know if there's anyone else who has a comment. Okay. If no one else has a comment, I just want to point out that Coburg Road is one of the main roads in Eugene that actually interfaces most closely with Springfield. Many of us depend on that corridor to be able to get to anything in Eugene. Originally, when we set up the BRT MX corridors, our MX route that went out to International Way and went out to the employment centers was supposed to go down Coburg Road. And Eugene tabled that idea way back when, before that route was finalized. So we looped the entire MX back to downtown Springfield. So in my mind, that has always been a glaring omission. So whenever I see something else come up where a project along Coburg Road, which to me ends up with more congestion, I've sat through lights coming off of I-105 up to 5 times cycling, which to me is just a whole lot of congestion. So I just want to encourage Eugene to rethink how you're dealing with Coburg Road, because there continues to be additions, and those of us who shop or end up over there or come over to meetings that need to be able to use that, or people trying to go to work. So I would just encourage Eugene to look at Coburg Road very seriously and not table more of the Coburg Road improvements, because I just think they're essential to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and we're not sitting idling on the road.
Can I be in the queue to respond?
Yes, go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lundberg. I agree. I mean, the Coburg Road is a critical piece. In this case, it was timing and preparation. That project was not far enough along to be ready for this application process, and there were other projects that we could look at that could be fully funded in this round. So it's not that it's tabled. We all recognize challenges on Coburg Road. It was what projects are ready to roll, can be fully funded. Road. So I hear you. We hear you. We're with you. It's just in this cycle at this time, there were other projects that were ready to go that are also key safety concerns for us in the city of Eugene.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? We will be voting, so. Okay. If there's no other comments, that I would be looking for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2020-05.
Second.
Second. Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, with that, the motion carried. Thank you. The next item is the Intelligent Transportation System Plan Overview. And I have Paul, and there is a presenter, Dennis Mitchell.
Yes, I'm going to do a quick introduction here just to remind you of what we're doing and set the stage for the presenter. As you will recall, the MPO is in the midst of updating its regional transportation plan, its congestion management plan, and its intelligent transportation system, or ITS plan. We have had a couple of presentations to you on this work, and while we have described to you what the ITS system and plan is, the Intelligent Transportation System, we thought that this would be a good opportunity to give you a little bit more in-depth presentation on the ITS work. That work has, specifically on that plan, has now been underway for a couple of months, and the consultant has been working with your local jurisdiction on collecting baseline data and other information. So with us today, virtually, we have Dennis Mitchell from DKS, and I'm about to attempt to give him, if I can do this right, of course, give me a second, I'm about to give him presentation controls over the screen, and he's going to provide us with his PowerPoint. Dennis, are you there?
I'm here, thanks, Paul. And yeah, as soon as you share the screen, give me rights, I will share the presentation.
You should have that now.
All right. Okay, so can everybody see it? Okay. So thanks, Paul, for the introduction. Let me introduce myself. I'm Dennis Mitchell with DKS Associates, and as Paul mentioned, we are working on 3 different efforts at the same time, which is the update to the RTP, Regional Transportation Plan, the Congestion Management Plan, and the ITS Plan. And so what I'm really going to talk about today is the ITS Plan itself. Let's see, so as I forward this, there we go. And so I'm going to talk about, what ITS is and what the ITS plan is, and then entertain any questions you might have. But I'm just going to give, some general overview of this, just so you get an idea of what we're doing here. So first, what is Intelligent Transportation Systems, which is, commonly referred to ITS. It's simply using technologies or technical strategies to automate practices that are already doing. In other words, you operate traffic signals in each jurisdiction, but there are always improvements that can be made to a system to automate it. In other words, if you're going to have a construction project and you need to change the timing at the signals during certain times of the day when you're doing construction, normally you'd have to either, in the past, go out there and change the timing manually, or if you have remote communication to it, then you would set it up on a timer, a different plan for how that traffic signal operates. So it's that sort of thing of, well, how can we use technology to improve the operations of the transportation system? That's really, all it is. It's not like a new thing that you've never done before, but it's a way of operating systems in real time, reacting to real time traffic conditions. That's the whole emphasis of what ITS can do. Don't try to read all this. These are just examples of ITS either devices or strategies, and I'm just going to mention a few of these out of here, out of this entire list that are already in place in Eugene Springfield area, one way or another. In other words, at certain levels, like signal systems. On the arterial side, maintaining and operating your signal systems, there's benefits to saying, well, let's all, City of Eugene, City of Springfield, Lane County, all have traffic signals, but how they're operated, and to the traveling public, it really doesn't matter whether in one city or another. They want to be able to drive through the system and expect certain types of operations. So aligning the operation of these signal systems is beneficial to the users of the system. So upgrades that can be made to those type of systems and updated controllers, updated communications, ways that you control those signals are all fall within the ITS purview. And there are different types of improvements that can be made. Another example would be surveillance, like traffic cameras, so you can understand and see what's happening on the road to maybe you'll make changes in how you're managing or providing information. Especially, let's say, on an incident that happens, if you have a camera, you can see it, you can determine what to dispatch, out to the scene. Do you need ambulances? Do you need fire trucks? That type of information is very useful in responding quickly and accurately to whatever happens out on the road. Another example, freeway management. ODOT has been adding on some of the freeway systems variable message signs, queue warning where there's detection of vehicles slowing down and advising them on a sign prior to getting to that location to tell people that there's something coming up to prepare for. Those are examples of ITS systems. Ramp metering, you've got some of those where you're looking at congestion on the freeway system, and by putting ramp meters, you're controlling the demand that gets on the freeway and spacing them out to lessen the impacts of all the vehicles trying to get onto the freeway at the same time. Traveler information, just providing information to the traveling public so they can make their own decisions on whether they want to change the time they go somewhere, change the route they go, or change the mode that they use, depending on current information on the entire transportation system. Parking management systems to help control traffic around major events that you have in this area. And then I think maybe the last one I'll throw out there is transit signal priority, where the bus system can, if they're late arriving to certain destinations, they can get priority over traffic signals if they're running late from the schedule, to be able to facilitate movement to keep it schedule adherence, which helps with ridership. So, and I'm hitting on these real briefly, but these are just some of the examples of what ITS can do. Some of the benefits of ITS: increased safety. Again, some of it like warning signs telling you that there's some incident or an accident ahead. Reduce fuel consumption. If you operate more efficiently on, let's say, the arterial signal system, you can, try to make it so people don't stop at every red light, and trying to coordinate lighting, the signal phases will help on fuel consumption. And again, obviously, one of the big things that ITS can do by trying to make the maximum use of the existing system is to reduce congestion. You're not going to ever totally eliminate congestion, but it's really trying to reduce the impacts of that congestion. And of course, providing real-time information. And this is important for not so much to say, well, we want people to do this or that. It's providing the information so the users can make informed decisions on how they want to make their travel choices. And so what's an ITS plan? This is what we're working on. And so the process, real simplified here, is that we're going to assess the existing system. What's the problems out there today? What's the systems that you have out there? How do they operate? Each agency got different levels of systems that are ITS related already. So we're assessing where that's at and what can be improved or what does not need to be improved. Both, we're just looking at, what's going on today, and then working with each of the local agencies in ODOT trying to develop what the needs are for the region as a whole based on, individual agencies and then aligning those needs so we have a common understanding of where we would like to go with this. And so from that, then we develop a recommendation collectively of projects or programs or strategies to implement to produce a more efficient system. Again, it's not to replace capital projects that are needed, but to look at projects that might be installed with capital projects or to use in place before a capital project can be funded. So it's really looking at, here's the type of things that we can do to help with the system, in conjunction with the capital program. And so I started touching on this, the benefits of the regional ITS plan. It provides guidance for system improvements, and again, both maximizing the existing system that's out there, but also looking at, what's the future system that you're planning to have and how can this work with that projected system. In other words, even we're looking at, there's always improvements that you can make to the existing system, but also taking into account what things are you going to build and how is that going to shift where the bottlenecks might be. And then the other thing is trying to establish alignment between agencies on what the goals are in terms of operational capabilities of the system. And then providing a list of those projects to meet that regional vision. And again, it could be projects that are standalone ITS projects that could be added to the RTP. It could, or individual TSPs, or they could be improvements like, if you're doing a road widening project, you add in conduit so you can put in more communications, or you can add a camera here or there along a route. Those simple things that you could add that are much cheaper to build during a construction project. So these are the type of opportunities that we would identify in this plan. I want to just give a brief history of ITS plans in the Eugene-Springfield area. So back in 2002, there was the trans plan that was adopted. And in 2004, the first regional ITS plan was adopted as an LNOT RTP. So basically between 2004 and today, a number of projects from that plan have been implemented and a number of them have not. And so we're looking back and going, okay, what was important in that plan at that time, and considering what's important, what's the goals and visions now, and are any of those projects that were not built yet relevant, and what new projects can we put together to further along to help the transportation system in this area. So it's been a number of years, and just to let you know, most of the agencies in Oregon are all right now going through the same process. Normally, you're looking at something that this plan should be really, 5 to 10 years with technology changing. This has been, better than 15 years since this plan has been updated. And so this should be a living document that can be changed. With this current version we're working on, we're looking to orient that to say, let's develop this as a living document that can be updated every couple of years rather than waiting 15 years. And this is just an example of the schedule. The top half of this is what was originally laid out for the process for the RTP and CMP. The bottom half is the ITS plan, and you can see it's done in the same time as the RTP update for a reason, which is this is one of the first in Oregon where these are actually done at the same time. A lot of times the ITS plan comes after, and it's sort of an ad hoc type thing. Here, specifically doing it at this time allows the goals and objectives of the RTP to be inserted into the thinking process of developing the ITS plan, and vice versa. Some of the strategies that go into the ITS plan can be forwarded to the RTP effort to take into consideration. So there's a reason why this was done at the same time, to try to influence each other and provide a more integrated plan. And so we've engaged staff from all of your agencies in this effort in providing information on what the current situation is and helping set the goals, objectives of the ITS plan in conjunction with your own goals and objectives for your individual TSPs and RTP, but also to look at how do we take a regional look at the user needs based on each individual agency, but taking those together and coalescing them into a regional vision. And then, so all of your staffs have been engaged in helping to define that. So right now we're in the process of, we've had meetings to develop the existing conditions. We have met to talk about what the user needs are and put that together, and it's out to review right now with each agency from the discussion with all the agencies together. And that's the current location in the process that we're at right now. So I know that was quick. It was just meant to be an overview of what we're doing and where we're at, and I would welcome any questions.
Do we have any questions?
I do, Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lundgren. I realize, just as I cannot see you on my screen, you probably couldn't see my hand waving. My remarks are going to be limited by my experience. It was interesting to hear this presentation start on intelligent transportation systems. It was like a deja vu to me. 30 years ago in 1990, my training firm had contracts to integrate traffic signal controls and programmable controls into all of the training that apprentice electricians received. And this is like a deja vu, simply identifying how there's additional electrical work and other work, low voltage and high voltage, that needs to occur. Here's my comment. It's about 60,000 foot up comment. I fail to see how an intelligent transportation system being developed is intelligent if it does not have the following things built into it. And I did not see, maybe they are. One is very specific carbon reduction objectives for the transportation system specifically. It was mentioned that you are coordinating with people from all of our entities. Lane County now has a climate initiative. It is developing those specific objectives, and it would be a shame for your group and LTD not to participate in that. and they are going to be fairly aggressive. I thought, although they're really not that aggressive, when I read that Oregon was as far behind as it is in its carbon reduction goals that were set as 1990 levels as a baseline in its transportation system. Number two, I don't see how a transportation system can be called intelligent if it does not specifically talk about how its investments would increase business opportunities and local job opportunities in our communities. It's not as if we're doing this in isolation. So I simply wanted to make those points. The carbon emission or reduction points kind of relate, I think, a little to what Mr. Zako mentioned earlier. I think those, whatever the program, whatever the investment, it seems crazy that we don't super lay all of that with very specific emission reduction goals in this sector. Thank you.
Mayor, I have a comment.
Yes, Mayor Smith.
I kind of echo what Commissioner Burning was saying about carbon reduction and going to the intelligent process with traffic signal coordination, cameras and things. Those are all very good things. When I worked as an emergency responder, I actually used ODOT cameras responding to I-5 in the Glenwood area, so I could see what was there before I got there. And so those are just little things. But I think even the smaller things is the programming and prioritization of traffic signals at intersections. I assume engineers and planners put together some kind of presumption of what the priorities should be for direction of travel and how we should signal and stop the traffic. One of the things that I wonder about is what is the feedback process once these assumptions have been programmed into these kinds of traffic controls. I'll use as an example Coburg Road and Game Farm Road. When the signals were updated, I don't know, years ago, I noticed that there was a presumption that Game Farm Road should have a priority to Coburg Road whenever a car came up, because the light would immediately turn yellow and then red for any eastbound or westbound traffic from Game Farm, and would stop all of the traffic on Coburg Road for one car that was making a right-hand turn. And this traffic on Coburg Road involves several vehicles, including trucks, because of gravel operations. I'll use Rexius as an example, but many other businesses and large trucks sitting there idling because we had to give priority to a right turn car. My point is, what's the feedback for that? How do we verify that once we've made those assumptions and set these programs to do these kinds of things? Because I think that's one huge element of our carbon reduction, is to see 6 diesel trucks and 5 or 10 cars all stacked up because one car came up in a priority. So that's another intelligent part that I'd like to see. Where's the actual observation of what that does to reinforce this intelligent label? Thank you.
Can I not so much an answer, but just a comment on that concern? Is the systems will enable, let's say, communications to your example of the signal, can allow systems to better react based on how you want to program it. It doesn't specifically say, well, this is how you're going to treat this individual signal. That will be still left up to the jurisdiction that manages that signal. Now, I agree with you. When you look at it just from a efficiency standpoint, then you want most of the green time to go to the largest number of vehicles. But then you go, okay, now I got to balance that with how often, how long do I have to make the person entering wait? And so that's a balance. And the ITS system isn't defining how that's done. It's just saying you choose how you want to time it. But now we can make the other signals downstream and upstream from that react to however you time that signal. It allows for that. It doesn't prescribe, exactly how you're going to do it. So the feedback loop would be still through the local agency that's managing that signal. it's not being prescribed by this overall system.
Mayor, this is Matt Rodriguez with the city. Could I also offer a little bit? City of Eugene.
Okay.
So yeah, to kind of piggyback on that, the one thing the ITS system does as well, as we build it out, is allows us to have cameras and actually be able to observe how what we have as intersection performance. So if we make a change, the ability to actually have monitoring of that to see how it's actually working is another real positive thing as we build out the network. And I know in Eugene, we've been trying to expand that, but the communications gaps that hopefully we'll start to address with the regional ITS, additional regional ITS work will help to improve traffic flow and make sure we're putting the right timing in place.
Okay. Mayor Smith.
Just an additional comment on a regional application. So we have lights. If one of the big problems we have in Coburg that is rare, but is still a huge issue when it occurs, is any incident on I-5 absolutely floods and gridlocks our city. And I know we have some county lights in there, so the just mentioned cameras to be able to react to that, and getting that infrastructure in when we're putting the elements of new traffic signals or something in, to have that camera ability to be able to monitor something like that. The simplest accident on I-5 will just absolutely gridlock Coburg. And again, it's a rare instance, but when it happens, it's a big issue for us. It actually blocks our emergency responders sometimes to get to the freeway to respond to that incident. So another part of that I agree that we should be looking at when we're doing the infrastructure initial development or upgrading, that we really need to look at the ability to add those things as needed.
Thank you. Okay, are there other questions or comments? Okay, yes, Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I just wanted to ask Mr. Mitchell, is carbon reduction or climate change a component of what you're doing, or is that not something that is involved in what you're doing?
Well, it certainly has an effect, but it's not directly, let's say in other words, if you're saying which project will actually affect that, it's not really a direct relationship. Basically, ITS is sort of to make the system that you have more efficient, which would in effect reduce carbon emissions, but it's not the target of what ITS can do. Isn't that it's a byproduct of the system rather than a direct.
But what I'm saying is, if you made it efficient, let's say in carbon reduction, that might be different than making it efficient in terms of, say, delay of most people or delay of all of the people together in the traffic system. So I'm just curious. I can see that there's a correlation there between having vehicles moving and not stalled or idling and carbon reduction. But I can also see that there might be a conflict between a goal of carbon reduction and say time efficiency in the use of technology to try to improve the time efficiency. And I guess what I got from the exchange involving Mayor Smith and Commissioner Burney was they think, and I agree with them, that carbon reduction or climate change should be factored into the work you're doing. But in response to my question, I'm hearing it's not really something that's going to be measured or known as a result of implementing what seems like a good idea, which is the ITS. So any comments on that? On how to do it? if we wanted it done?
You know, some of the federal efforts that are going on right now is looking at analysis tools and modeling in relation to these type of systems, and because it's not well understood, you know, and obviously you can infer things, but there's no current way to sort of evaluate how that might impact one way or the other on what you're talking about. I guess the best thing I can say is the system, you know, it's really sort of a less expensive way to try to reduce congestion, help, you know, reduce delay, reduce accidents, and that's the main focus of it. And so a byproduct should be lower emissions, but beyond that, I don't think there's a good way to say one way or the other or anything beyond that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Looks like it.
Okay. With that,
can I just say thank you for the time, and I want to thank everybody for allowing their staff to participate in this effort. It's very helpful to have all the involvement.
yes, thank you very much, Dennis. Okay, so with that, the next item on the agenda is the Safe Routes to Schools letter of support, and I believe Emma Newman, I see her initials and that you're here.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Emma, do you need the screen? Or?
I do not need a screen unless you'd like me to put something up on it, but I think this should be pretty quick and simple. The draft letter of support was in your packet. So if you look to pull up that specific item, item 7, you'll see a letter of support for Springfield Safe Routes to School application. And then right after that, there's attachment 8 MPC that shows the vicinity and aerial map. So briefly, Springfield, as many of you know, started a Safe Routes to School program back in 2013. When that program was established, there were school-based action plans that were done that did walkability and bikeability assessments in each neighborhood around each school throughout Springfield. These 2 crossing enhancements along Jasper Road are what Springfield is applying for the state Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant funding for. One is by Douglas Gardens Elementary School, one is by Mount Vernon Elementary School, both of which are Title I schools. And these locations rose to the top through the evaluation criteria that our regional Safe Routes to School program developed that weight a number of different things, including equity, including safety improvements, and proximity to school is really great for both of these since the crossings are so close to the school. They would serve a lot of students. I think with that, I'll just note that we had applied for these locations in the last round of funding. Unfortunately, did not receive the funding at that point. We've scaled back our application since a few other crossings that had been incorporated before were funded with other funds. And we're feeling hopeful, but would love MPC support with this draft letter of support for the application process. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions? Yes, Councilor Fishneri.
Hi, Emma. Thank you. Just actually is probably down in the weeds further than we need to go, but I'm going to go there anyway. The crossing at the Douglas Gardens Elementary, and I looked at the location, and at some point, maybe you can get back to me later, but I wanted to know what the thought process was is putting that crosswalk on the west side of Dondea as opposed to on the east side. Just from traffic flow standards, if you had it on the east side, then traffic on Dondea can continue, which most of them will be going to the west, typically speaking. And plus, it seems like it'd be a better location, but I'd love to hear what the thought process was. And it's not necessarily important to this forum, but if you can come back around to me on that, I'd appreciate it.
I'd be happy to follow up with some of our traffic engineers. Some of it pertains to the turning movements in the area and wanting to provide the safest crossing possible. You will see that that location does include a pedestrian refuge island, which
Correct.
increases safety further at that location.
Yeah, I was involved in the one out west or out east Main Street that was by the Ridgeview Elementary location, and was very heavily involved in the location of that. So I'm familiar with some of the justifications on how those are placed or where they're placed. But it seems like I just like to have more explanation on that one.
We'll follow up. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. I encourage this project. I think this project's great. I love them.
Are there other comments, questions?
Christine, Mayor. Yeah, just this is not a comment on the Springfield request for a letter of support, just actually a point of information that Eugene is also submitting two applications for two projects, Safe Routes to School projects, one each in the Bethel School District and in the Eugene School District. We did not go through a process to ask formally for a letter of support from this body, although we did ask from the Land Act. So just wanting everyone to know that we are also going through that application process.
Great, thank you. So I will just take a second to comment. Both of these school crossings are on a road that isn't maybe one of those where you've got schools on residents in 25-mile-an-hour areas. These are ones where folks, traditionally Jasper Road has been considered kind of rural. So there's lots and lots of kids trying to cross there. So I'm really happy that we're able to put in crosswalk enhancements so those kids can get back and forth from school safely. So are there other, yes, Commissioner Burney?
I just wanted to echo my support for this. I drive that road very frequently, and I think this is a huge safety improvement for those children. I don't know if now is the time to make a motion, Madam Chair, but I just wanted to say that.
If there are no other comments or questions, we can entertain a motion. Mr. Burney, did you want to make that motion? Oh, did somebody else have a comment?
No, it was just me getting ready to make a motion, but go ahead, Joe, and I'll second it.
Okay.
I'll do my best, but I do move that the Metropolitan Policy Committee write a support letter for this project. And I probably need to provide more words than that, but that's my motion.
I'd second the motion to approve the letter of support.
That motion is okay. Yeah. Okay. So that motion was okay, and so I'm looking for all those in favor. Say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. And next item is our follow-up and next steps. And I believe Franny and Bill, are you still on the line? If so, do you want to do an ODOT update?
Yes, I would, Mayor. This is Franny Brindle from ODOT, Area Manager. And the OTC will be meeting on July 15th to approve the 21-24 STIP. And then they're going to immediately start developing and discussing the next step, the 24-27 step. And this process will start with allocation of available funding among categories and programs. And so they want to have that funding allocation by program decided by December of this year. And so in the next month ahead, August, September, even into October, the OTC will be putting together packets of material and information sharing and ways for the MPO, the ACT, and advisory committees to provide input on those funding categories. So we'll need to reserve some time in the next calendar for the MPO to talk about that. And I'm looking to get a subject matter expert to come out and share that information with you. You'll also be seeing email distribution. There'll be a survey in July. And I will be as a liaison helping to get the people together for those surveys, you know, sharing email lists, etc., so that you're hearing about these things on email as well. And there'll also be an online open house, etc. They're also talking about, again, having another face-to-face with the MPO chair and the Lane Act chair later in the year, I would guess around December. They're not sure with, of course, the COVID and the virtual meeting, if that's going to work, but they're going to have that discussion with the OTC and try to figure that out as well. So I just wanted to share that and to be looking forward to that in the future. That this will not be about funding specific projects, but more about funding the percentage of categories. You know, how much should go into the preservation, how much should go into enhancement, et cetera. So, and I'm assuming that Connect Oregon will be in that discussion as well. I have that specific question to our Travis Brower to get some answer on that as well. But that's what I have. Thank you.
Okay, so Franny, can I ask, you're talking about bringing it back to MPO because, of course, I think we're all very interested in how those allocations are divvied out and what information we can have, and I'm sure the sooner the better.
Yes, absolutely. That's the whole idea, is to get the input from the MPO and the Lane Act. That's what the OTC is asking for, input.
Okay, great. And Paul, did you have?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. The OTC meeting next week is kicking off the process for the funding allocations in the next step. The packet for next week's OTC meeting speaks to OTC next week directing staff to assume a 10% reduction in federal funding. And if federal funding is received above that level, that they would come back at that time for direction on how to spend that money. And then they're also asking next week for the OTC to approve the general categories, which would remain the same as they are currently, which are real quickly enhance. These are the funding pots. Enhancement, which is sort of improvements to the system. Safety, non-highway, such as bicycle and pedestrian. Local program funding pot, the fix-it, in other words, maintenance, and then, or preservation, and then other functions. And then they talk about how over the next several months, and this is really what Franny was getting to, they would then, if the OTC approves those funding pots over the next several months, they would take input and have discussions about how much money to put into each pot. The point I want to raise about next week's meeting is that they are asking for a decision on that assumption about reducing the federal funding level by 10% and deciding later how to spend that. If you recall, we've had discussions about that, and OMPOC decided at its June meeting to send a letter to the OTC, which we have drafted and will be presented next week to the OTC, to ask them to not wait to decide how to spend additional federal funding, but to have that as part of these upfront discussions now. Typically, if they wait until the money's received, they have 30 or 60 days at most to make that decision, and it really allows for no discussion or public input. So we've asked in that letter for them to make those decisions about how they would spend additional federal funding now instead of later. And that will be presented next week at the OTC meeting.
Okay. Great. That sounds prudent. Okay. So, and that was all of the ODOT report?
That's all I have, Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Franny. Okay. So the only other thing I have here is the MTIP administrative amendments, and there are four of those. And so if there's no question about those, then the next steps is to look at our next meeting, which it says the Springfield Justice Center, but I'm guessing
That's aspirational. But,
yeah, everything's aspirational. Okay, so if there is nothing else for the good of the order, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the MPC meeting for this month. Thank you.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
Okay.
Commissioner Sorensen had a question. I think Lucy may have raised her hand as well. No, she was raising her hands first.
Were they saying goodbye? They're waving goodbye.
No, I actually did want to bring something up.
Okay.
If we have time, thank you, Joe. I just wanted to ask, is staff planning to send any response back to our public commenters about their concern that we've been talking about all of the restrictions on the ability of MPC to deal with climate change because we don't regulate land use, and their critique that we have spent a lot of time on what we are not authorized to do, but they want us to be more active. Could we get staff to send them back a letter and copy the MPC on it so we can not let that drop?
What would the letter say?
Commissioner, what I would suggest is that the staff response, and I believe MPC, I would recommend should consider that we are addressing that. We are going to take that into consideration as we move forward. That letter was in response to the discussion at MPC last month around the LCDC rulemaking that is coming up. We are going to keep you apprised of that. LCDC is meeting later this month. And again, plans in September to start rulemaking around how to, probably, again, this is not certain, but how to probably mandate regional coordination and regional planning around greenhouse gas reduction. We are engaged in that process. We are planning to have MPC discussions around that as the LCDC rulemaking process moves that forward. We've been very public about we will be having those discussions at MPC.
Can I add a comment to this, Lucy?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So, it occurs to me, just thank you, Commissioner, for making that point. It occurs to me that we could, in a sort of a systematic way and in a disciplined way on each item, make a reference to how relevant that item is to climate change so that we're just putting it up in front of ourselves and also in the public. So when we are talking about traffic congestion, what do we see? I mean, it might get deeper over time, but I think we do have a possibility within our agenda to just on each item say, what are the implications here in terms of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions?
Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologize for ending this a moment or two longer. I appreciate what Mayor Venus has said. I think that makes sense. But something, and my remarks in that regard, I can see may have been a bit misapplied as it related to ITS, although I think this relates to ITS as well. I think Mayor Venus's suggestion would keep that front and center. I would also like to mention a concern. Paul, you said that this is happening, but I don't see it happening with us as much discussing. And you also mentioned you anticipated a mandate. The word mandate scares me. It scares me because sometimes they're unfunded mandates, but if you anticipate any areas where you expect a mandate, I think we should discuss those areas in terms of how we want to respond or what actions we want to initiate before specific actions are thrust upon us. So as it does relate to this issue, I think we should bring this up in an agenda, have you tell us what areas you expect mandates in, and have us discuss them and get in front of them.
So I'll jump in there because I spent 2.5 hours on the phone at LCDC giving testimony along with Rob Ennerfeld not to make anything mandated that give us that flexibility. So we have very specifically provided input not to have this set up in a way that it's all mandated.
And just to remind NPC members, that lengthy meeting that the mayor and Rob Interfeld presented testimony on was on behalf of the MPO Policy Board, and you folks approved their talking points. So we have been carrying that message to LCDC already.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna, one more time, if there is nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting and hope everyone enjoys this beautiful weather. Okay.
Don't wave goodbye.
Okay, don't wave, just say goodbye.
Sorry about that. Goodbye.